Hello and welcome to another, and let us not forget the word exciting episode of The Outsiders, Series 2, Episode 8.
8.
Wow, we are cutting through them like a knife through butter. So, anyway, welcome. I'm so pleased to have you with us. And when I say us, I refer to my creative sidekick and partner and co host, Zach. Hi, Zach.
Hello. It's very nice to be back again after our soaking wet trip last time when we met.
That was an adventure and a half, wasn't it,
It
Zach?
was it was a good adventure, and
Was good.
we it was an adventure of a lifetime, which we hope to repeat at some point again in the future.
I'll hold back on the word lifetime. It was an adventure, Zach, yeah.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the weather had other plans. Transport was working nicely, the weather not so. And therefore, we couldn't really broadcast on YouTube because the lords above had other ideas.
It did.
But anyway, I digress. Let's kick off with our new theme for today's episode, and that is really the impact of imagination in children's stories, of course, from an outsider's perspective. And to start this, I'm going to throw the mic, not literally this time, across to Zach to tell me a little bit about his experience and his thoughts on the topic of writing children's stories from an outsider's perspective.
From an outsider's perspective, thank you. Good to be back again. So yeah, this week there's lots of stories, lots of children's authors um, who uh, who I would consider outsiders. Also, they write characters who are the interesting characters in children's stories are outsiders. Um, so I mean, the one that really sort of comes to mind and we've talked about is Roald Dahl, who sort of appeared to be quite an outsider on a personal level, although I think he was quite very much a family man, wasn't he? But sort of and charismatic and enigmatic, maybe the two words that come to mind. But his big character, who we all know and love, is Willy Wonka, who I think is one of the one of the better outsiders, an eccentric, I would say.
Right. Do you
Do
want to
you,
develop on that a little bit,
yeah,
Zach?
yeah. I thought you were going to say something,
I
but
was, but I just said let's develop on
let's
that
develop on that. So Willy Wonka has kind of, in my head, has become a sort of a figure of an English eccentric. How it's sort of this idea of developing this sort of world of being on his own, but he invites people into it on his terms. Um, and of course, if everyone knows the story, he invites Charlie in, who wins the golden ticket.
Shh,
I could
don't
start
give away the
singing.
plot.
Just start singing in a minute. Um, and the image that I have in my head, the very famous one, is of Gene Wilder playing Willy Wonka, who was just such a charming, crazy, odd, kind of scary figure. And Roald Dahl wrote characters that had an element of scary sort of side to them. They had a grotesque side to them in a way.
Sinister, possibly.
Sinister is a good word to use. There's certainly that scene in the film, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, when they're on that weird trip in the boat and it suddenly goes very strange. Um,
Is that the
almost
bit where Gustav's mother goes, Gustav, don't eat so much chocolate?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There he's stuffing his face. But yeah, all the there were lots of people, kids had something wrong with them. It's sort of a social commentary, with
Yeah,
even though it's a children's book, and a lot
a
of the best,
tale of morals.
yeah, a lot of the best stories have got that because children they like to feel a bit of fear, don't they? They like to feel a bit of that emotion. Do you not think in the stories?
I don't know if the word like comes into it, but possibly they are captured by it
Mhm.
somehow. I remember watching that film, but also another one that we're going to list off, which is Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
Oh,
which was again another sort of a fantastic backdrop of crazy worlds and European culture that was sort of almost David Lynch style, kind of off the wall, and sinister
yeah,
and dark and light and all sorts of different backdrops to the plot. But when you talk about being scared, when the appearance of the child catcher came, I don't think I've ever hid. I mean, when I was at the cinema, I was, down on the floor,
yeah.
and even probably some years later, even possibly now, if I was to see it, it would have some kind of scary kind of repercussion. Um, it was really quite a
He's
character.
definitely a scary character. And I know that you're not a huge science fiction fan, but also for me as a child watching Doctor Who, you watched it because it became known as the thing you watch from behind the sofa because of the scary monsters and the Daleks were hugely scary to me. And yet, from an adult, they're just the fact that they couldn't go upstairs, the fact you literally could just run up some steps and you'd be safe. In those days, now they can fly because they overcame that. But there is that. Yes, I think you're right. There's an excitement to feeling that, knowing that something good is going to happen at the end. I think that, and that's, as we've touched on before, the hero's journey, isn't it? It's that storytelling has these elements of a roller coaster,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
and Roald Dahl is very much part of that. What about your? So you touched on Chitty Chitty. Very difficult to say. I wouldn't say that after a couple of pints.
Oh, well, Willy Wonka is also one. Yes,
We're putting ourselves in dangerous territory.
we certainly are. We're holding back. Um, so, what about myself in regard to?
To children's fiction, um, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is one that you've mentioned. Uh,
Oh, there are many many stories. I mean, um, I think that without listing them off, I think the point is that the idea of it, these stories sort of capture and develop the children's imagination. That I think is, these worlds, these backdrops that are, painted as sort of are all consuming, and a child with the openness and the interest of these stories can get taken into all kinds of places, which only develops the creativity and the imagination. I think this
hmm.
is the point we're trying to make. But Zach, with that in mind, tell me a little bit about your story with writing children's books, because this is what we really want to sort of delve into a little bit more
Yeah,
about our own experiences.
it is yes, it's the imagination, and we both chose creative outlets, didn't we? In times of the stress and trauma and whatever word we want to use for the difficult times that we went through. And I certainly used creativity as an outlet to connect with my children, as you did with your daughter. And I wrote a book called Pirates versus Fairies, which I wrote and I asked my children for things to put into it. So they wanted a
Ah,
story that had pirates. That was my son. Fairies was my daughter. Hippopotamuses had to go in it. Dinosaurs had to go in it, and ships, and um, and then I just sort of developed this world where all of this existed as one, and created an adventure. It was just an adventure story called about a ship captain who used to be a fairy who had his wings cut off, so he became a pirate. But his sort of secret was that he was actually he had magical powers. Um, and I wrote this for them. Now, the one story I want to share, though, is how I advertised it. Not that I want to turn this into a marketing method. So basically, I wrote it around the time when Aardman Animation did a film called Pirates. I think Hugh Grant was the voice of the pirate captain, and we went to see it as a family. And my partner and I, we printed off postcards of the cover of my book and wrote on the back where you could buy it. And then we put them on each seat in the cinema before we got there early, obviously, for the screening. And then as we left, in the foyer, they would have postcards of things coming soon or local businesses. So we stuffed a load in there as well, and then quickly ran out of the cinema before anyone caught us. And my son was beside himself with fear that we were going to get caught and probably arrested. In his mind, he was 5 at the time, I think 5 or 6. In his mind, he was thinking that we'd done something really, really dangerous, really rebellious. You know, we're going to get caught. The police will catch us. We're going to do this. His imagination was sort of overriding any sort of anything else, really. But I mean, obviously, I knew as an adult that all I'd done is put some postcards in a thing, and the worst that's going to happen is they're going to throw them in the bin, which is probably what they did, in all honesty. But it was a fun way. I don't know if it helped, don't know if it sold any books, but that is my guerrilla marketing method of the week.
Very good.
There we are. That's my story. So Mark, we dealt with yours we dealt with GUI in the past, in other episodes, but again, you used that as a creative outlet, didn't you, as a connection? Do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, well, a bit like you, my story goes before that particular book series. And my first story with Olivia was actually a similar title to yours. It was called The Fairy Factory. And the beautiful thing about this is we were in China at the time, and we lived on pretty much a vast lake, I mean, like a sea. And which, of course, again gives you the imagination, the backdrop that it is a sea rather than a lake. And we would walk around this lake, parts of it anyway, with her on a bicycle, and I'd be walking along with her. And we would sort of tell each other, you know, a story, and it would evolve and develop into something much, much more. And I thought, wow, we've got something here. So she just turned 7 at the time. And so for her 7th birthday, I managed to create this book for her birthday, using her illustrations, which she'd drawn like at home for fun. And I put the words together. And when I presented that to her for her birthday, she was, you know, beside herself with joy. I mean, it was wonderful. And I think that triggered a connection between the two of us, that we like to tell each other stories and connect. And it's really magical. And I'm sure that all of the authors that you've listed all had similar stories that brought them into that kind of mindset to create, you know, a story for other children. But I think the point to this particular episode is we're talking about this creativity, imagination being used by people who we call outsiders. And I think what we've kind of mentioned and agreed together is that most creators, whether they're, you know, writers or authors, musicians, filmmakers, designers, graphic artists, whatever, are people that actually are on the outside looking in, and that in itself gives them a different perspective on the world.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the creativity that they seek, the outlet that they choose, is their way of connection to the world, or even if it to one person. I mean, I always said to myself, as when I started my writing journey, if I can just get, you just want one person to read your book and enjoy it, and then you've made that connection.
That's right.
And got that sort of recognition that you want. And it's because it's all very well writing for yourself, and I've done tons of stories that I've never seen the light of day, and I enjoy the process because it's a creative outlet, and it's cathartic for my sensitive emotional moods and things like that. But then when you put it out there and it becomes a thing on its own, and somebody else connects to it that you don't know, that isn't connected to your family, then it's like, wow, this is that's quite a special feeling to have that. So it's important to put yourself out there, isn't it, as an outsider? Well, it's not important to, but it can be quite rewarding to do that?
Yeah, I think what you said is spot on in terms of it being the creativity being cathartic. The need to be out there, I don't think is necessary, but I think it's nice if it evolves. But I
Yeah,
think reality is that we have to be aware of who we are, our authentic nature, and do it for ourselves. The next step, of course, is yeah, if people enjoy it. I mean, of course, we want people to enjoy it, and of course, it's great if you get some sort of
yeah,
coverage or some interest. But ultimately, if you haven't been giving yourself permission to be creative, which was definitely true for me for a long, long time,
yeah,
then it just builds up and builds up. And I think if you have been creative all through that period of time, then you might have, I don't know, you might have expectations of something more. But I think in both of our cases, it's more of a cathartic expression, and the idea of connecting our ideas with other people is just gravy on the chicken or butter on
yeah.
the toast or whatever it happens to
I
be.
was going to say butter on the knife, but butter on the toast sounds much better.
Wherever you want to put the butters at, absolutely.
Yeah, we're not butterists. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And yeah, the process. I was going to say something about it's got to come from you, hasn't it? When we can tell as audiences and everyone that we that listens, we're all an audience member to something. We can tell when it's not been created from the heart, when it's been done by the numbers or produced. How many sequels get made that don't have the same feeling and don't have the same emotion because it's been done for money.
Which leads me beautifully to sharing with you, Zach, some of the wonderful cities
Oh,
that we have. Yeah, I mean, I mean, as we mentioned in the last couple of pods, we are watching with fascination some of the places and people that are sort of clocking into our pods now. And I just thought I would share some with you because
this
it's
is my
really fascinating.
favorite part.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is great. So we've got. It would seem big fans in Boardman, Oregon, which is a place that I'd never heard of before. But to all of you in Boardman, Oregon, thank you so much for listening in. We do hope you continue to enjoy our pods. And
Yeah.
again, feel free to reach out and communicate with us on our Facebook page, which is what, Zach?
Mark and Zach, the outsiders, hip not to be square is the
10 out of 10, Zach. Well done. We've got also people in Cloney in Meath, which I think is in Ireland,
oh,
which is great.
nice.
Helsinki, Miami, Florida,
Wow.
Ashburn, Virginia, Falmouth, Cornwall, Syracuse, New York. I've been there.
Oh,
Leeds in Leeds. Well, that's always good to know.
yeah.
Budapest, which is a place that I know and love
Yeah.
very well. We have Dublin, we have Brussels, we have Vienna, we have Aachen, the North Rhine, which is Germany. We have Lisbon.
Wow.
We have a place in South Korea that even though I've got quite a lot of Asian experience, cannot pronounce, but it is a very long name.
Yeah.
Pyeongtaeng Sang Sigyang Do. Sounds like somewhere in Wales, but it's in
You need a
South
long
Korea.
envelope for that one.
And yes, and we have someone in the Rhone or the Rhine. Yeah, we've
Wow.
got it's great, and we are
Global.
so excited and happy to hear from you, or to know that you're listening to us, and we would
Yeah.
love it very much if you would reach out and communicate with us on our Facebook page, as well as claiming, you're free. 5 steps to living your best life as an outsider PDF, which you can't really call yourself an outsider and not have one. It is created by Zach and I with love and thought. And if you'd like it, all you need to do is just drop into our Facebook group, which is open to you, and write the word imagination. What do you think, Zach?
I,
It's a long word, but
I think that's
imagination.
imagination sounds good to me.
And with that, maybe you could also put your city, because we
Yeah,
obviously are very interested in that. And by return of message, we will send you your 5-step PDF free
yeah,
of charge, and you know, very quickly.
absolutely.
Um,
It's a
yeah,
wonderful piece of work. It's almost like a badge of honor for outsiders.
yeah, yeah. It is. It
Yeah.
is. It certainly is. Okay. So, Zach, any thoughts? Any solutions? Any thoughts you would like to share on the pod regarding using your creativity and your imagination, connecting with children, the benefits of
Yeah,
doing this?
certainly the benefits. Our imaginations are very one of our most inspiring and most powerful tools that we have as human beings. We can imagine anything. We can picture ourselves. We could be sitting on in our bed, picturing ourselves in another country by the sea, and use that as a form of meditation to calm ourselves. If we're in a stressful situation, we can imagine something better. We can imagine ways of developing things. So I think it's important to exercise our imagination. And the best way of doing that, in my opinion, is to read. Just read books. It can be anything. It could be children's books. It could be a thriller. It could be. It's just the art of doing that and allowing your mind to wander and explore. I think is very beneficial to our emotional health.
And I would like to add to that on the converse side, writing
Yep.
and drawing and singing and whatever it is that you haven't done enough of, do more of. For me, this was the case. I've read thousands of books, love to read, but one of the things I didn't do, and have only recently, over recent years, started to learn to do, is to do rather than
Yeah.
not to do. And the release of the writing with and for my daughter, for myself, um, the songs that I've created, the paintings that I've done, things that I've started to do rather than just be in my head, I think is a very important thing to share,
Most
because
definitely.
we just block ourselves, and we want to release out into the world. You use your imagination and be creative.
Yeah, imaginations are very powerful. So it's about using it to your best ability and exploring it. Allow it to wander. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. It is. Okay. Well, Zach, it's about that time, I think, to call, time on another pod.
Yeah.
Once again, to all of you listening, we are so grateful to have you with us. We are happy to see you from all over the world, which is wonderful, beyond our imagination.
Yeah.
And please, feel free to join us on our Facebook page, and stay tuned to our pods. So until then, it's goodbye from,
Him,
and it's goodbye from me. We'll
me.
see you in the next one. Take care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.